I never thought a blizzard would give me the leverage I needed to finally take down Brenda Carmichael and her reign of terror over the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. But life has a funny way of delivering exactly what you need when you least expect it. My name is William Ortega, and I had been living in this suburban nightmare outside of Rochester, New York for exactly 3 years when everything went down. The house itself was beautiful, a 2-story colonial with a decent yard and a garage that actually fit my truck. But the HOA made every single day feel like I was living under some kind of dictatorship, where the rules changed based on whatever mood Brenda woke up in that morning. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in mid-January. Rochester winters are no joke, and we had just gotten hammered with 18 inches of snow overnight. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, looked out my bedroom window, and groaned at the blanket of white covering everything. My driveway looked like an untouched ski slope, and I could barely see my mailbox through the accumulation. I got dressed in layers, pulled on my boots, and headed out to my garage around 6. The HOA bylaws stated that all driveways and walkways had to be cleared within 24 hours of snowfall cessation. The snow had stopped around 4 in the morning according to the weather app on my phone, so I had until 4 the next morning technically. Plenty of time, or so I thought. My snowblower had other plans. I pulled the starter cord once, twice, 3 times, nothing but a pathetic sputter. I checked the gas tank and it was full. I checked the spark plug and it looked fine. I pulled that cord probably 30 more times over the next hour, and the damn thing refused to cooperate. By 7:30, I was sweating despite the 15-degree temperature, and I decided I needed to call a repair shop. The earliest anyone could come look at it was Thursday afternoon. That meant I was going to have to shovel by hand, and with 18 inches of heavy, wet snow, that was going to take me most of the day. I grabbed my shovel and started working on the walkway first, figuring I should at least make the path to my front door safe before tackling the massive driveway. I was about 2 hours into shoveling when I heard the crunch of boots on snow behind me. I turned around to see Brenda Carmichael standing at the end of my driveway, wearing a puffy purple coat and holding her ever-present clipboard. She was 52 years old with that particular haircut that seemed to be issued to every HOA president in America, the kind where the back is shorter than the front, and the whole thing is dyed an unnatural shade of blonde. "William," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I see you are making progress, but I wanted to remind you that the bylaws require complete clearance of all walkways and driveways within 24 hours of snowfall cessation." "I know, Brenda," I said, leaning on my shovel. "The snow stopped at 4 this morning." "I have until 4 tomorrow morning. I am working on it." "Well, I just wanted to make sure you were aware," she said, making a note on her clipboard. "Several other residents have already completed their clearance. The Hendersons finished at 6 this morning. The Petersons were done by 7. "Good for them," I said. "Their snowblowers probably work." She pursed her lips. "Equipment failure is not an excuse for non-compliance, William. Perhaps you should have maintained your snowblower better or had a backup plan." I felt my jaw clench. "Brenda, I am clearing the snow. I will have it done well before the deadline. Is there anything else?" "Just doing my job," she said with that fake smile. "Have a good day." She walked away, her boots crunching in the snow, and I went back to shoveling with renewed frustration. The thing about Brenda was that she had made my life miserable from the moment I moved in. My grass was too long by half an inch. My garbage cans were visible from the street for 15 minutes longer than allowed. My car was parked in my driveway facing the wrong direction one time when I pulled in late at night. Every single violation came with a fine, usually between $50 and $200, and I had paid out probably $3,000 in HOA fines over 3 years. I shoveled for another 4 hours, taking breaks every 30 minutes because my back was screaming at me. By 2 in the afternoon, I had cleared my walkway and about half of my driveway. My neighbors on both sides had finished their driveways hours ago using their functioning snowblowers, and I felt like the lazy slob of the street even though I had been working my ass off all day. I went inside to warm up and make some lunch. While I was eating a sandwich and trying to get feeling back in my fingers, I got a text message from my buddy Marcus, who lived 3 streets over in the same development. "Dude, did you get your driveway done? Brenda is on a warpath today. She already wrote up the Johnsons for having snow on their roof." I texted back, "Snow on their roof? Is that even in the bylaws?" She says it is a safety hazard. They got a $200 fine. I put my phone down and rubbed my eyes. This was getting ridiculous. I finished my lunch and headed back outside to tackle the second half of my driveway. The temperature had dropped a few more degrees, and the sun was starting to get lower in the sky. I shoveled until my arms felt like they were going to fall off, and by 5:30 in the evening, I finally cleared the last shovelful of snow from my driveway. I stood there in the growing darkness, breathing hard, looking at my clear driveway and walkway. It had taken me nearly 12 hours with breaks, but I had done it with almost 11 hours to spare before the deadline. I felt a sense of accomplishment as I headed inside, stripped off my wet layers, and collapsed on the couch. The next morning, I woke up to find an envelope tucked into my front door. It was from the HOA, and my stomach sank before I even opened it. Inside was a notice of violation and a fine for $500. The violation cited was failure to maintain timely snow removal resulting in safety hazard and aesthetic decline of community standards. I read it 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each reading. I had cleared my snow within the 24-hour window. I had done everything right. I grabbed my phone and called the HOA office number, which of course went straight to voicemail because it was only 7 in the morning. "This is William Ortega at 847 Maple Ridge Drive," I said after the beep. "I received a violation notice for snow removal, but I cleared my snow within the required time frame. I want to dispute this fine. Call me back." I did not hear back that day, or the next day. On Friday afternoon, I drove to the HOA office, which was located in a small strip mall about 2 miles from my house. Brenda was there, sitting behind a desk, typing on a computer. "I need to talk to you about this fine," I said, holding up the notice. She looked up at me with that same fake smile. "William, hello. What seems to be the problem?" "The problem is I cleared my snow within 24 hours like the bylaws require, and you still fine me $500. She pulled up something on her computer. "Ah yes, I see the issue. While you did technically clear your snow within the window, you did not do so in a timely manner that met community standards. Several residents complained that your property looked unsightly for most of the day on Tuesday. Community standards. That is not in the bylaws. The bylaws say 24 hours. The bylaws also include a general clause about maintaining community aesthetic standards at all times," she said, pointing to her screen. "Section 12, subsection 4. Your property was the last on the street to be cleared, which created a negative impression of our community. I was shoveling by hand because my snowblower broke. I did the best I could. Again, equipment failure is not an excuse. Many residents own backup shovels or have contingency plans. This is Rochester, William. Snow is not unexpected." I felt like I was arguing with a brick wall. "I want to appeal this to the HOA board." "You certainly can submit a written appeal. Brenda said. "The next board meeting is in 3 weeks. Your appeal will be reviewed at that time. However, I should inform you that the fine is still due within 30 days regardless of the appeal status. If the appeal is successful, you will be refunded." "This is ridiculous," I said. "This is community living," Brenda replied. "Have a nice day, William." I left the office fuming. I went home and immediately started drafting an appeal letter, citing the exact bylaw language and the timeline of my snow removal. I submitted it that evening through the HOA online portal and waited. The next 3 weeks were quiet. We got a few more small snowfalls, but nothing major, and I made sure to borrow a neighbor's snowblower to clear my driveway within hours each time. I was not going to give Brenda any more ammunition. The board meeting was held on a Thursday evening in the community center. I showed up 15 minutes early and sat in the back row of folding chairs. There were maybe 10 other residents there, most of whom were probably dealing with their own HOA issues. The board consisted of 5 people, including Brenda, who served as president. There was Todd, the vice president, a balding guy in his 60s who seemed to agree with everything Brenda said. There was Susan, the treasurer, a quiet woman who barely spoke. There was Michael, the secretary, a younger guy who always looked uncomfortable. And there was Patricia, the at-large member, who occasionally questioned Brenda but usually got shut down. The meeting dragged through various boring topics like landscaping contracts and pool maintenance schedules. Finally, after nearly an hour, they got to appeals. "We have one appeal tonight," Brenda announced. "William Ortega is appealing a $500 fine for failure to maintain timely snow removal. Mr. Ortega, would you like to speak?" I stood up and walked to the front. "Yes, thank you." I cleared my snow within the 24-hour window specified in the bylaws. I have no idea what timely means beyond that specification. I worked for 12 hours to clear it by hand after my snowblower failed. I met the requirement. "But you were the last on your street to complete the work," Brenda said. "That is the issue. The community standard is to clear promptly, not to wait until the last minute." I did not wait until the last minute. I started at 6 in the morning. I worked all day. That is prompt. Todd spoke up. "Did you consider hiring a snow removal service in the middle of a blizzard? Every service in the city was booked solid for days." "That sounds like poor planning," Todd said. Patricia raised her hand. "Can I see the exact bylaw language?" Michael pulled it up on his laptop and read it aloud. "All driveways, walkways, and other paved surfaces on homeowner property must be cleared of snow and ice within 24 hours of snowfall cessation to ensure safety and accessibility." "That says 24 hours, Patricia said. "It does not say anything about being the fastest or matching some undefined community standard." Mr. Ortega met the requirement. "Section 12. Subsection 4, Brenda said quickly, states that all properties must maintain aesthetic standards consistent with community expectations. An uncleared driveway for most of the day violates that standard. That section is about lawn maintenance and exterior paint colors," Patricia argued. "It is not about snow removal timing beyond what is already specified. It applies to all aspects of property appearance," Brenda insisted. They argued back and forth for another 10 minutes. Finally, Brenda called for a vote on the appeal. Todd, Susan, and Michael voted to uphold the fine. Patricia voted to overturn it. 3-2, I lost. "The fine stands," Brenda announced with obvious satisfaction. "You have 22 days remaining to pay. Next item on the agenda." I walked out of that meeting feeling defeated and furious. $500 for busting my ass to clear snow in compliance with their own rules. I paid the fine the next day because I did not want to deal with late fees and potential legal action, but I started looking for ways to get out of this neighborhood. The problem was that I had refinanced my mortgage just a year ago, and the rates were much higher now. Selling and moving would cost me tens of thousands of dollars that I did not have. I was stuck, and Brenda knew it. Over the next month, she seemed to take particular pleasure in finding new violations for me. My porch light was out for 3 days before I noticed and replaced it, $50 fine. I left my garbage can out until noon on trash day instead of bringing it in by 10 in the morning, $100 fine. My car was parked slightly over the edge of my driveway onto the grass one morning when the ground was still frozen. $75 fine for damaging common area grass that was not even common area. By late February, I had paid over $800 in fines in just over a month, and I was at my breaking point. Then the weather forecast showed another major storm system moving in. This one was supposed to be bigger than the January storm, potentially 24 to 30 inches over 2 days. The storm arrived on a Wednesday night and dumped snow continuously through Friday morning. I had gotten my snowblower repaired after the first storm, and I was ready. Except Wednesday night, while the snow was still falling heavily, I got another knock on my door around 8 in the evening. It was Brenda, standing on my porch in the middle of the blizzard. "Just wanted to remind you that the 24-hour clock starts as soon as the snow stops," she said, shouting a bit over the wind. "I will be checking first thing in the morning." "The snow is not supposed to stop until Friday morning," I shouted back. "And I know the rules, Brenda." "Just making sure," she said and walked back through the blowing snow to her car. I closed the door and watched through the window as she drove away. She was absolutely insane. Who goes door to door during a blizzard to remind people about snow removal? The snow finally stopped around 6 on Friday morning. I had taken the day off work in anticipation. I got dressed and went out to my garage around 7. My snowblower started right up, and I began the process of clearing my driveway. This time I had close to 30 inches to deal with, and even with a working snowblower, it was going to take several hours. I worked steadily, making passes up and down my driveway, throwing snow onto the lawn and the edge of the street. Around 9 in the morning, I was about halfway done when I noticed something strange. As I was blowing snow toward the side of my property near the fence line I shared with the community common area, I saw that the snow was settling into a depression in the ground I had never really paid attention to before. I stopped the snowblower and walked over to investigate. The depression was about 15 feet long and 4 feet wide, running along the fence line. I brushed away some snow and saw a metal grate underneath. It was a ventilation grate, and when I knelt down and looked closer, I could see that it led down into a crawlspace beneath the community center building, which sat on the other side of the fence about 50 feet away. A light bulb went off in my head. An evil, petty, perfectly justified light bulb. I finished clearing my driveway and walkway by noon, well ahead of the deadline. Then I spent another hour using my snowblower to pile every bit of snow I could from my yard directly onto and around that ventilation grate. I built a mountain of snow probably 4 feet high and 10 feet in diameter, all centered over the grate. The snow completely buried it and covered the entire depression. The temperatures over the next week were supposed to be relatively warm for February, climbing into the 40s during the day. That snow was going to melt, and when it did, all that water was going to run right through that grate into the crawlspace beneath the community center, where the HOA offices were located. I felt a savage sense of satisfaction as I put my snowblower away and headed inside for a hot shower. I had cleared my snow in perfect compliance with the rules. What happened to the extra snow on my property was my business. If it happened to melt into HOA property, well, that was just nature taking its course. The weekend passed quietly. The temperatures rose as predicted, and by Monday, the massive pile of snow I had created was definitely starting to melt. I could see water running across my lawn toward the grate. I went to work Monday morning with a smile on my face for the first time in weeks. Tuesday afternoon, I got a text from Marcus. "Dude, did you hear? The community center is flooded. The HOA office is apparently a disaster." I texted back. "No way, what happened?" "Nobody knows yet. Water in the crawlspace or something. Brenda is losing her mind." I had to work very hard not to laugh out loud at my desk. I finished my workday and drove home, making a point to drive past the community center. There were 2 plumbing company vans parked outside, and I could see people carrying equipment in and out. Perfect. Wednesday morning, I got a mass email from the HOA. "Due to unexpected water damage in the community center, the HOA office will be closed for repairs. We apologize for any inconvenience. For urgent matters, please contact President Carmichael directly." I deleted the email and went about my day. Over the next week, I watched with satisfaction as the snow pile slowly melted away. By the following Monday, it was almost completely gone, and I could see the grate again. I used my leaf blower to clear away the remaining slush and any evidence of the intentional piling. 2 weeks after the storm, I got a knock on my door on a Saturday morning. It was Brenda, and she did not look happy. "William, can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked. "Sure, what is up?" I said, keeping my expression neutral. "Did you notice anything unusual with the drainage on your property after the last snowstorm?" "Unusual how?" "We had significant water damage to the community center. The crawlspace flooded. It caused about $40,000 in damage to the foundation, insulation, electrical systems, and the flooring in the office above. We are trying to determine the source of the water." "That is terrible," I said, putting on my most sympathetic face. "I hope you figure out what happened." The plumbers traced the water entry to a ventilation grate that runs along your property line. They said there was evidence of a large amount of snow having been piled directly on top of the grate, which caused all the meltwater to funnel into the crawlspace. "Huh," I said. "I mean, I cleared my driveway and walkway like the bylaws require. Where I put the extra snow on my own property is my business, is it not?" Her eyes narrowed. "You did this on purpose." "I piled snow on my own property. That is not a violation of any rule I am aware of. In fact, that is exactly what you are supposed to do with snow. Put it on your lawn so it does not block the street or sidewalk. You deliberately caused damage to HOA property," she said, her voice rising. "I cleared my snow in compliance with all bylaws. The fact that natural melting and drainage caused water to flow onto HOA property is not my responsibility. Maybe the HOA should not have put a ventilation grate so close to private property lines. That seems like a design flaw." "This is not over, William," she said. "I guess we will see," I replied and closed the door. I spent the rest of that day expecting police to show up or a lawsuit notice to arrive, but nothing happened. A few days later, I got another mass email from the HOA announcing a special assessment of $300 per household to cover the repairs to the community center. I smiled as I paid my $300, knowing that Brenda was paying it too, along with everyone else in the neighborhood. But Brenda was not done. Over the next 2 weeks, she hit my property with violation notices for every tiny thing she could find. My mailbox was slightly tilted, $100 fine. There was a small crack in my driveway that she claimed was a safety hazard, $200 fine to repair it within 30 days. One of my window shutters was a slightly different shade than the others due to sun fading, $150 fine to repaint or replace it. I paid all the fines because I had no choice, but I started documenting everything. I took photos of every violation notice, every fine, every email. I also started researching New York HOA laws and discovered some interesting information. HOAs in New York are required to follow their own bylaws exactly as written, and they cannot create arbitrary rules or standards that are not explicitly documented. They also cannot selectively enforce rules against specific homeowners. I started going through the neighborhood with my phone camera, documenting violations on other properties that Brenda was ignoring. The Hendersons had a mailbox that was dented and rusty. The Petersons had 3 different shutter colors across their house. The Johnsons had massive cracks in their driveway. None of them had received violation notices. I also requested copies of all HOA meeting minutes and financial records for the past 3 years, which I was legally entitled to as a homeowner. It took them 2 weeks to provide them, and when I went through the records, I found some very interesting discrepancies. There were several payments to a landscaping company owned by Brenda's husband. There were reimbursements to Brenda for various expenses that seemed questionable, like $500 for office supplies every month. There was also no clear accounting for where all the fine money was going. I started talking to other neighbors who had been on the receiving end of Brenda's enforcement crusade. Marcus introduced me to 7 other homeowners who had similar stories of excessive fines and selective enforcement. We met at a coffee shop one evening and shared our experiences. "She fined me $300 because my fence was 6 inches too tall," said David from Oak Street. "But the Thompsons have a fence that is at least a foot taller than mine, and they have never gotten a notice." "She fined me for having a vegetable garden in my front yard," said Karen. Not the HOA Karen, but an actual nice person named Karen from Birch Lane. "Said it violated aesthetic standards, but there is nothing in the bylaws about vegetable gardens." "She tried to fine me for parking my work van in my driveway overnight," said James from Willow Court. "I am a plumber. I need my van. The bylaws say no commercial vehicles, but a van is not a commercial vehicle. It is just a van with my company name on it." We all had stories, and we all had documentation. I suggested we organize and present a complaint to the HOA board as a group. Everyone agreed. We spent the next 2 weeks compiling everything into a detailed report showing selective enforcement, questionable financial practices, and violations of the HOA's own bylaws by the board. The next board meeting was in mid-March. All 9 of us showed up, along with probably 15 other residents who had heard through the grapevine that something was happening. The meeting room was packed. When the meeting got to the public comment section, I stood up first. "My name is William Ortega, and I am here representing a group of homeowners who have serious concerns about HOA governance and enforcement practices. We have prepared a detailed report that we would like to submit to the board for review." I handed copies to each board member. Brenda's face went pale as she flipped through it. "We have documented selective enforcement of bylaws, with certain homeowners being cited for violations, while other homeowners with identical or worse violations are ignored. We have documented fines issued for violations that do not exist in the written bylaws, based solely on arbitrary interpretations of vague language. We have also identified financial irregularities that require explanation." Patricia, the at-large board member, was reading intently. Michael, the secretary, looked uncomfortable. Todd was whispering to Brenda. "This is highly inappropriate," Brenda said loudly. "You cannot just show up and make accusations without following proper procedures." "Actually, we can," I said. New York law allows homeowners to address the board during public comment periods. We are requesting a formal investigation into these matters and a suspension of all enforcement actions until the investigation is complete. David stood up next and shared his story about the fence. Then Karen talked about her vegetable garden. Then James discussed his work van. One by one, each member of our group stood and presented their case. The other residents in the room were nodding along, and several of them raised their hands to share their own experiences. By the end of the public comment period, it was clear that Brenda had lost the room. Even Todd looked shaken. Patricia spoke up. "I move that we suspend all new enforcement actions pending a full review of our policies and practices. I also move that we hire an independent auditor to review our financial records." "Second," Michael said immediately. "This is absurd," Brenda protested. "We are operating completely within our rights as a board." "Then an investigation should clear everything up," Patricia said. "All in favor?" Patricia and Michael voted yes. Susan, who had been silent the whole meeting, also voted yes. Todd voted no. Brenda voted no. 3-2, the motion passed. Brenda looked like she wanted to explode. "This meeting is adjourned," she snapped and gathered her papers. Over the next month, things got very interesting. The independent auditor found that Brenda had been siphoning HOA funds through her husband's landscaping company, which was charging triple the market rate for services. She had also been pocketing a portion of the fine money by recording lower amounts in the official records than what homeowners had actually paid. In total, she had embezzled approximately $60,000 over 3 years. The auditor's report was presented at an emergency board meeting in April. The room was packed with angry homeowners. Brenda tried to defend herself, claiming the payments were all legitimate, but the auditor had done his homework. He had compared rates with other landscaping companies, found that the work was often not performed as documented, and discovered that Brenda had no receipts or justification for most of her expense reimbursements. "I have served this community for 8 years, Brenda said, her voice shaking. "This is a witch hunt led by a disgruntled homeowner who cannot follow simple rules." "This is not about following rules," Patricia said. "This is about you stealing from this community. I move for your immediate removal as president and for all board positions, effective immediately. I also move that we refer this matter to law enforcement for criminal investigation." "Second," Michael said. The vote was 4-1, with only Todd voting no. Brenda was removed from the board. She stormed out of the meeting, and I honestly thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, Brenda filed a civil lawsuit against me personally, claiming I had deliberately caused the flooding damage to the community center and demanding $40,000 in damages plus legal fees. She also filed a complaint with the local police claiming I had committed vandalism. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Santos, who specialized in HOA disputes. She was not cheap, but she was good. "You have any evidence that you intentionally caused the flooding?" Rebecca asked during our first meeting. I cleared my snow within the bylaws. "I put the extra snow on my property. That is all I did." "Can anyone prove otherwise?" "Not that I know of. I mean, she knows I did it on purpose, and I know I did it on purpose, but proving intent is a different story." "Good. We will argue that you cleared your snow in compliance with all rules, and where you placed the excess snow on your own property was your prerogative. The HOA's design flaw in placing a crawlspace ventilation grate along the property line is not your problem. We will also countersue for harassment and selective enforcement. The police investigation went nowhere because, as Rebecca predicted, there was no evidence of criminal intent. I had cleared my snow as required. The fact that natural melting caused drainage issues was not a crime. The civil lawsuit dragged on for months. Brenda's lawyer tried to argue that I should have known the grate was there and that piling snow over it would cause damage. Rebecca argued that property owners cannot be expected to know the location of every utility or ventilation system on adjacent properties, and that proper drainage design was the responsibility of the property owner, which in this case was the HOA. During discovery, Rebecca subpoenaed all of Brenda's communications, and we hit gold. In several emails to other board members, Brenda had explicitly stated that she was targeting me for enforcement because I had questioned her authority. She had written things like, "William Ortega needs to learn his place, and I will make sure he regrets challenging me." This demonstrated clear selective enforcement and harassment. Rebecca filed a motion to dismiss the case and a countersuit for harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of New York HOA fairness laws. The judge reviewed the evidence and dismissed Brenda's lawsuit in August, 6 months after it had been filed. The judge also allowed our countersuit to proceed. Meanwhile, the criminal investigation into Brenda's embezzlement was moving forward. The district attorney's office got involved because $60,000 was well above the threshold for felony charges. In September, Brenda was arrested and charged with grand larceny and fraud. Her husband was also charged as an accomplice since he had knowingly overbilled the HOA through his company. The news spread through Meadowbrook Heights like wildfire. The local newspaper picked up the story and ran an article about HOA corruption and abuse of power. Brenda and her husband both made bail, but the damage to their reputations was done. Our countersuit went to mediation in October. Brenda's lawyer knew they had no case and that the evidence of harassment was overwhelming. They agreed to a settlement where Brenda would pay me $15,000 for legal fees, emotional distress, and the excessive fines I had paid over the years. She also had to sign an agreement never to serve on an HOA board again and to not contact me or come onto my property. The criminal case went to trial in December. I attended several days of the proceedings. The prosecution laid out a detailed case showing how Brenda had systematically stolen from the HOA through fake invoices, inflated charges, and skimming fine money. Her husband took a plea deal and testified against her, which pretty much sealed her fate. In January, almost exactly 1 year after the blizzard that started everything, Brenda was convicted on multiple counts of grand larceny and fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution of $60,000 plus penalties and interest, which came out to about $85,000 total. The HOA elected a new board in February. Patricia became president, and they immediately set about reforming the bylaws and enforcement policies. They established clear, objective standards for violations, implemented a transparent appeals process, and created a policy prohibiting selective enforcement. They also refunded excessive fines to homeowners who had been targeted by Brenda, which got me back another $1,200. My settlement money from Brenda arrived in March, and I used part of it to take a vacation to Florida for a week. It was the first time I had felt truly relaxed in over a year. When I got back, the neighborhood felt different. People were friendlier. The oppressive atmosphere of constant surveillance and arbitrary rules was gone. Marcus and I grabbed beers one evening in April, sitting on my back deck as the weather finally started to warm up properly. "You know, I still cannot believe everything that happened," he said. "All because of a snowstorm." "It was not really about the snow," I said. "The snow was just the catalyst. Brenda had been abusing her power for years. Someone was going to stand up to her eventually. But you were the one who actually did it. And that snow pile thing was genius, by the way. Petty, but genius." I laughed. "I was just clearing my driveway in compliance with HOA bylaws. Not my fault that the HOA had poor drainage design." "Sure, sure," Marcus said with a grin. "Keep telling yourself that." We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. I thought about everything that had happened, from that first ridiculous $500 fine to watching Brenda get convicted of felony theft. It had been exhausting and expensive and stressful, but it had also been worth it. The following winter came around, and we got another major snowstorm in January, almost exactly a year after the original blizzard. This time, I cleared my driveway with no issues. My snowblower worked perfectly. There were no violation notices, no harassment, no arbitrary fines. I put the extra snow in a neat pile on my front lawn, nowhere near the property line or any drainage grates. Just a normal pile of snow like any normal homeowner would make. The new HOA board sent out a polite reminder email about the 24-hour clearance rule, along with a note that anyone who needed help due to equipment failure or physical limitations could request assistance from a list of volunteer neighbors. It was a completely different atmosphere. The community center had been fully repaired, with upgraded waterproofing and a redesigned drainage system that properly channeled water away from the building. The crawlspace ventilation grates had been relocated and covered with protective barriers that would prevent snow accumulation. The HOA office looked better than ever. I ran into Patricia at the grocery store one day in February, and she stopped to talk. "William, I wanted to thank you again for everything you did last year," she said. "If you had not stood up to Brenda, who knows how long she would have kept stealing from us." "I was just looking out for myself at first," I admitted, "but I am glad it helped everyone." "Well, the neighborhood is much better now." We actually had our first board meeting where no one yelled or threatened to sue anyone. It was refreshingly boring. "That sounds perfect," I said. Life in Meadowbrook Heights settled into a comfortable routine. The HOA still existed, and there were still rules, but they were reasonable rules enforced fairly and consistently. When someone violated a bylaw, they got a friendly warning first unless it was a serious safety issue. Fines were reduced to reasonable levels and only assessed after repeated violations. My property stayed in good condition because I actually wanted to maintain it, not because I was terrified of arbitrary fines. I fixed the crack in my driveway on my own schedule. I repainted my shutters when I felt like it. I kept my grass mowed to a reasonable length without measuring it with a ruler. The settlement money from Brenda helped me build up my emergency fund and pay off some debt. The refunded fines covered my legal costs. Overall, I came out ahead financially, which felt like justice. In March, I got a letter from the district attorney's office informing me that Brenda had been transferred to a minimum security correctional facility where she would serve out the remainder of her sentence. Her husband had completed his sentence, which had been reduced to probation and community service due to his cooperation. But they were now divorced, and he had moved out of state. The house that Brenda and her husband had owned in Meadowbrook Heights went up for sale in April to help pay the restitution. A nice young couple with 2 kids bought it. They introduced themselves to me one Saturday afternoon when they were moving in. "We heard this neighborhood had some drama with the HOA," the husband said, "but our realtor said it has all been sorted out now." "It has," I confirmed. "New board, new policies. It is a good place to live now." "That is good to hear." I am terrified of HOAs after some of the horror stories I have heard. "Just follow the reasonable rules and you will be fine," I said. "And if you ever have any issues, talk to Patricia, the new president. She is actually helpful." They seemed relieved, and we chatted for a while about the neighborhood and the schools and the best places to eat in Rochester. They were good people, and I was glad they were moving into what had been Brenda's house. It felt like a fresh start for the whole street. Summer came, and the HOA threw a community barbecue in June. It was the first social event they had organized in years that was not mandatory. People actually showed up because they wanted to, not because they were afraid of getting fined for non-participation. There was no such rule, but under Brenda's reign, everyone had been paranoid about everything. I brought potato salad and spent the afternoon talking with neighbors I had barely known before. We talked about normal things like our jobs and our families and our summer vacation plans. No one mentioned HOA bylaws or enforcement actions or fines. It was refreshing. Marcus came up to me at one point with a beer in his hand and his arm around his wife's shoulders. "You know what the best part of all of this is?" he said. "What is that?" "We actually like living here now. Like, genuinely enjoy it. I was seriously looking at houses in other neighborhoods last year. Now I do not want to leave." Several other people nearby nodded in agreement. Someone started a chant of "Thank you, William," which was embarrassing but also kind of touching. I held up my hands. "I just did what anyone would have done," I said. "No, you did what someone with guts would have done," Patricia said. "Most people would have just kept paying the fines and suffering in silence. You stood up and fought back, and you did it the right way. You documented everything, you followed the law, and you did not stoop to her level." "Well, except for the snow pile thing," Marcus said with a laugh. "The alleged snow pile thing," I corrected, "which was never proven and was completely in compliance with all bylaws." Everyone laughed, and the conversation moved on to other topics. The barbecue went until sunset, and it was one of the most pleasant days I had spent in the neighborhood. As summer turned to fall and then to winter again, life continued peacefully. The second winter came around and we got our usual Rochester snow, but it was manageable. I cleared my driveway promptly with my reliable snowblower. No piles near property lines, no flooding, no drama. I occasionally thought about that January morning 2 years ago when I had woken up to 18 inches of snow and a broken snowblower. I thought about the satisfaction of building that massive snow pile over the ventilation grate, knowing exactly what would happen when it melted. It had been petty and vindictive and technically legal, but more importantly, it had been the first domino that led to everything else. If I had not gotten that ridiculous $500 fine, I probably would not have started documenting violations. If I had not piled the snow over the grate, Brenda probably would not have sued me. If she had not sued me, we would not have discovered her embezzlement during the discovery process. If we had not discovered the embezzlement, she would probably still be terrorizing the neighborhood. Sometimes the universe puts opportunities in your path, and you just have to be willing to take them. My opportunity came in the form of a blizzard, a broken snowblower, and a vindictive HOA president who pushed me too far. I never regretted any of it. Not the hours of shoveling, not the thousands of dollars in fines, not the stress of the lawsuit, not the petty revenge with the snow pile. It had all been worth it to rid our community of a tyrant and restore some sense of normalcy and fairness. On the 2-year anniversary of that first big blizzard, Rochester got hit with another major storm. 22 inches this time. I cleared my driveway in the morning with no issues. The HOA sent out their standard reminder email about the 24-hour rule. No threats, no harassment, just a simple reminder. I stood in my cleared driveway that afternoon, looking at the pile of snow on my front lawn, positioned safely away from any drainage grates or property lines. The sun was shining, the air was crisp, and my neighborhood was peaceful. I went inside, made myself a hot chocolate, and sat down at my kitchen table. I pulled out my laptop and started writing down the whole story, from beginning to end. Not because I needed to share it with anyone, but because it was one of those experiences that felt worth documenting. A reminder that sometimes standing up to bullies works. Sometimes the system actually delivers justice. Sometimes petty revenge leads to positive change. I titled the document, How a Blizzard and a Broken Snowblower Brought Down an HOA Tyrant, and saved it to my hard drive. Maybe someday I would share it. Maybe not. For now, it was just a personal record of one of the wildest years of my life. As I finished writing and closed my laptop, I heard my phone buzz. It was a text from Patricia asking if I wanted to join the HOA board. They had an opening for an at-large member position, and several neighbors had suggested my name. I thought about it for approximately 5 seconds before typing back my response. Thanks for thinking of me, but I have had enough HOA drama for one lifetime. I am happy to help out with community events or volunteer projects, but I think I will pass on joining the board. She texted back a laughing emoji and completely understand. Thanks anyway. I put my phone down and looked out my kitchen window at the snow-covered neighborhood. It was beautiful in that way that winter landscapes are, peaceful and clean and bright. This was my home. Not perfect, but good. Not without problems, but better than it had been. And if we ever got another HOA president who decided to abuse their power, well, I knew exactly how to handle it now. Documentation, organization, legal action, and if necessary, creative snow pile placement. Though hopefully it would not come to that again. The sun was setting, painting the snow pink and orange. I finished my hot chocolate, rinsed the mug, and started thinking about what to make for dinner. Just another normal evening in Meadowbrook Heights, exactly the way it should be. Life had returned to what it should have been all along. A community where people could live comfortably without fear of persecution from a power-hungry board president. The rules still existed, but they were applied fairly and reasonably. People still had to maintain their properties, but they were given reasonable time and assistance if needed. The transformation of Meadowbrook Heights from a fearful dictatorship to a functional community was remarkable. Property values actually increased once word got out that the toxic HOA leadership had been removed. New families moved in. Long-time residents who had been considering leaving decided to stay. The neighborhood had a second life, a rebirth of sorts. I sometimes wondered if Brenda ever reflected on her actions while serving her sentence. Did she understand that her own greed and cruelty had been her downfall? Did she realize that if she had just been reasonable and fair, she could have continued being HOA president for years? Probably not. People like Brenda rarely have that kind of self-awareness, but that was not my problem anymore. My problem was deciding between making tacos or pasta for dinner, and that was exactly the kind of problem I wanted to have. I chose tacos.